So, believe it or not, we're basically midway through the NBA playoffs. Round 1 has already concluded. We're already about 2 games into round 2 of all of the series. And I do believe it's very important to discuss and talk about everything that we've learned so far. Boy, there's a lot to discuss. Number 1, probably the most surprising thing is that experience doesn't really matter in the playoffs this year. Experience has been a constant theme in postseason play throughout NBA history. The old mantra or the old ideology is that experience is going to outweigh youth and athleticism, but this time not so much. I was actually looking at this as the first round concluded, and it actually blew me away. Every noticeable star outside of Kyrie Irving that is 30 years old or older has already been eliminated in the first round. Jimmy Butler in Miami, he already gone. Joel Embiid already gone. Dame, Giannis already gone. Obviously the Lakers with LeBron, AD already gone. The Phoenix Suns with Kevin Durant already gone. And then you have the Clippers gone as well. Again, if I'm not mistaken, the most noteworthy star that has a lot of experience and miles on his tires is Kyrie Irving. That's it. And the point I'm making is that this is definitely transitioning into a new league. We're starting to see a lot of new faces making deep postseason runs, and this obviously means a lot for the NBA, and I do believe it has its pros and cons. Now, on the flip side, it's a bit depressing because I'm pretty sure many basketball players that we all grew up liking aren't in the postseason anymore. I think this is the first time since LeBron's sophomore season that the second round is not going to consist of LeBron, KD, or Curry, which is new territory. And more importantly, this is an issue that many people in the NBA community was afraid of because it felt as if like the NBA wasn't prepared for the inevitable and we're already here. There is no more face of the NBA. However, I do believe what Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves are doing right now is very interesting. It's intriguing. I do believe Boston is still scaling really well in ratings as well. So all of those things are going to be interesting to see, but I do believe nevertheless, it's great that we're moving in this direction because it's necessary for us to prepare ourselves for a new generation of ball players. And I'm actually surprised how young the playoffs has been so far. It's actually pretty insane. Second thing that I've noticed that's very important, speaking about the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that is defense. Defense matters so much in this postseason run that it's scary. I've been watching basketball for about like 15 years now, and this is by far the most influence I've seen defense have on a playoff setting or a playoff year in quite some time. And we're starting to see a lot of that wane on some offensive players, which definitely provides a lot of credence and credibility to a lot of people who are leveraging a lot of criticism to today's stars just because they were playing in a very weak defensive league. You know, I was definitely on the side of skill matters, and I still think that has a lot to do with it, but it's definitely noteworthy. The pace is down noticeably. I want to say the offensive rating from the regular season to the postseason is down like 2 to 3 points. Field goal percentage, 3-point percentage is also down 2 to 3% as well. And just looking at it from an eye test perspective, the more physical and defensive oriented you can be in this postseason run, the more success that you tend to see. I mean, just look at some of these players that are putting up all-time great offensive numbers in the regular season and how much things have shifted over in the playoffs. Jokic so far is averaging 27 points, 15 rebounds, 9 assists, all great, but turnovers are up to nearly 4 a game. 3-point shooting is down 28% from behind the arc. Jamal Murray, somebody who's been known to be a playoff riser, is being held to 20 points per game in this postseason run. Shooting that is sub 40% from the field, sub 30% from behind the arc as well. Only getting to the free throw line 3 times. Very shaky. KCP is shooting below 40% from the field, below 30% from behind the arc. He's not making his threes. Luka, granted, is hurt, so he's not 100%, so I don't want to be, too harsh on him. Luka's going out here putting up volume numbers, 28 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds. Shooting splits, though, sub 40 from the field, sub 25% from behind the arc, sub 80% from the free throw line. All that's bad. Again, high turnovers as well. Brandon Ingram, this postseason run was held to 14 points on 34, 25, 89 shooting splits. Yuck, disgusting. CJ McCollum didn't do that much better either. 18 points on 42% shooting from the field, 24% from behind the arc. Yikes. Shea is having his moments, but the shooting splits have dropped still as well. In the video not too long ago, we talked about how Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant couldn't figure things out all at the same time in any of those 4 games when they got swept. Jason Tatum is struggling. Halliburton may be still dealing with a hamstring injury, but he's also struggling. There's a lot of players who looked really, really good offensively in the regular season that just don't look that great in the postseason. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the attention to detail defensively and the level of physicality that they are allowing in the playoffs that they weren't allowing in the regular season. The Knicks are more than likely going to find themselves in a path to the Eastern Conference Finals because they just make a name for themselves with their defense and their rebounding and just completely over leveraging their offense all on Jalen Brunson. And that's really it. Shout out out of Josh Hart, he's making his threes, but that's certainly a defensive-oriented team that really dictates pace. The Minnesota Timberwolves that utterly embarrassed the Phoenix Suns, a team that was supposed to have a really high offensive ceiling with 3 high-volume, very talented and skilled scorers, and they're carrying over that defensive impact in the next round against a Denver Nuggets team that many people, including myself, thought was really difficult to defend, but the physicality and length is really starting to overwhelm a great offensive unit led by a player that I was very high on in Jokic, and it definitely seems like that is starting to take away from a lot of the impact that we see from a lot of teams. If it wasn't for Boston and Minnesota, the offensive rating just would have been even lower. Right now it's at 112. It would be even lower than that, and Boston, again, just going through a weak conference, so it's really hard to even gauge how good they are offensively until they match up against some real competition. Speaking of which, boy, is the Eastern Conference weak. I know a lot of people are going to make some assessments about the New York Knicks, and by all means, congratulations to them. They're doing great. Jalen Brunson is exceeding expectations once more. It's a great story from a team that really needs a win, a franchise that has a great fan base, that has something to root for. But, bro, the conference is a one-team conference. The Celtics are going to skate by this conference and never really be challenged until they get to the finals, which honestly might be a bad thing. Sure, they're going to make the NBA finals. I definitely believe that. I don't think that there's any team left that can really compete with them. There is like a concern that's floating around that no one isn't really talking about in the media right now, and that's Jason Tatum not really playing that well. A concern that will probably be magnified when they finally get to the finals and match up with a legitimate title contending team. Also, it's like very obvious how much talent, skill, team-based, coaching, completely different, night and day from what we see in the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference, and I believe that tends to be the difference maker on why so many Western Conference teams for the better part of the last 25 years tend to win championships, is because they are battle tested before they get to the finals. The Celtics aren't really going to get tested until then, and I think that's unfortunate. Tatum so far in this postseason run is averaging 21 points, 10.5 rebounds, 5 assists, only turning the ball over fewer than 2 times a game, but shooting splits of 41, and I'm rounding up, 25% from behind the arc, yikes, and 82% from the free throw line. Those shooting splits are egregious. Luckily for him, he has 2 other players on his team that can pick up the slack in terms of scoring, and they're averaging 20 plus points as well, and Derek White and Jaylen Brown, and they're doing so on crazy efficiency. In particular, Derek White, who is averaging 23 points, shooting 57% from the field, 50% from behind the arc on 9 threes, and 90% from the charity stripe. Crazy. This Celtics team and who they are from, a statistical standpoint and how great they produce, of course, they're going to be one of the better teams, but it is a big concern that Jason Tatum is performing this poorly, because I do wonder who they have to face in the finals. Speaking of which, it might be Minnesota. I was not the biggest fan of the Rudy Gobert trade, and you know what? I'm man enough to admit I was wrong about that trade. That trade turned out to be a difference maker for a franchise that has been looking for a difference maker ever since they lost Kevin Garnett. They finished the season with the 3rd best record in the Western Conference, exceeding many expectations, including my own. Anthony Edwards has been sensational this postseason run, something that I alluded to but was a bit hesitant on before I jumped the gun towards the tail end of the regular season, and he is producing at literally all-time highs. He's averaging 32 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, shooting 55% from the field and 42% from behind the arc, something I was not expecting, 82% from the charity stripe, and defensively he's been sensational. Karl Anthony Towns, when he's on the floor, because he's fouling a lot still, 21 and 9 with 2 assists, shooting splits of 57, 54, and 84, which has honestly been enough for a team that really lives off of their defensive output. Shout out to Rudy Gobert, DPOY. Shout out to Jaden McDaniels, should be first team all defense. Also, huge shout out to Naz Reid, 6th Man of the Year recipient, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. My goodness. Looks like he's hitting every single corner 3. I swear it's ridiculous. So Mike Conley as well. Veteran, consistent. I don't want to overlook you. I don't think anybody expected them to be this good. They're already up 2-0 against the Denver Nuggets, a team that was expected to win a championship by many, including myself, a team that had home court advantage and lost both of them, a team that is now going back home, has the potential to sweep the defending champs. This is crazy. And actually, speaking of that, I think that's the next thing that we've learned so far in this postseason run, and that is anything is possible. I don't think that we're in the era of basketball where teams are going to repeat. A lot more brilliant minds in the NBA who figure out different ways to counter, play both sides of the floor. Talent is at an all-time high, so it's really, really hard to kind of keep up with what works and what doesn't work. There's a possibility that Minnesota could go on and win a championship, and no one was expecting that at all outside of like Minnesota Timberwolves fans. Also, huge shout out to Oklahoma City Thunder. They're handling business as well. So there's a couple of things that could potentially happen. Boston is still a great team. I don't want to count them out, but it would not surprise me where we stand today if the Minnesota Timberwolves are raising a championship championship because they're already up 2-0 against the defending champions and they're going back home. Another thing that we've learned, due to the amount of disappointment that has happened early on this season, kind of leads us into, once more, a lot of talent acquisition and moving in the upcoming years. Personally, I believe that the playoffs is a great time to just watch basketball, not only because the level of play elevates pretty high, but also the drama gets really thick as well, because the level of disappointment that we've seen from some of these teams will force organizations to make very tough decisions in the upcoming months. I have heard, and I also believe, that there will be a lot of player movement in the upcoming months, in large part because, again, certain players didn't live up to expectations or teams disappointed in the first round. And also you have the new structure of a lot of financial commitments with the new tax aprons that have been set in place as well that will definitely leave a couple of teams hesitant on handing over a large lump sum of money. A conversation we're starting to have with Paul George with Clippers, conversation that apparently Jimmy Butler is also having with the Miami Heat. I look at how a lot of things are kind of developing, how things are kind of piecing together, regardless if it's a lot of success or disappointment, and I do believe a lot of that is being revealed in this postseason run. But more importantly, what we have really gathered so far this postseason run is that unless the Denver Nuggets can flip the script and come back being down 0-2, a team that has either A, never won a championship, or B, a team that has not won a championship in a very long time will win a ring. I don't think the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to make it out of the second round. The Celtics go on to win a championship this year. That will be the first championship they won since 2008. The second championship that they've won since the Bird, McHale, Parrish, Dennis Johnson era back in the 80s. If the New York Knicks win a championship, which I don't think that will happen, but if they do, Stephen A. Smith will have a heart attack live on air with the hardest erection that you ever seen for Jalen Brunson. Also, more importantly, this will be the first championship that they've won since the 70s, which is crazy. OKC winning a championship will be the first time in franchise history and will push a lot of narratives and agendas on who actually won that trade, which I think at this point is pretty undeniable. The Thunder won the Shea trade with all those draft capitals. And if Minnesota wins a championship this year, then that will be the first in franchise history as well. And that's something that is, again, not expected. Denver can still win as well. I don't want to remove that from the conversation since they haven't been eliminated out of the playoffs yet. But if they win a championship, then we have to put Jokic in new territory as he just won his third MVP. It just got announced today. And on top of that, winning 2 championships back to back will definitely put him in rare air. It's just a lot of things that could and probably will manifest itself that we've never seen, or at least haven't seen in quite some time. And the bracket is turning out to be something that no one really even expected. There is a possibility that we get a OKC Minnesota conference finals and a Boston Celtics New York Knicks conference finals out east, and possibly a Boston and Minnesota NBA finals matchup, because that's how it's looking right now. That's how everything is shaping up right now. I don't want to jump the gun. I do believe that there's a lot of things to learn and gain from this postseason run that is very, very interesting. It is mind-blowing to me how we even got to this point. Now, if you want to watch these playoff games with me, you can do so. I watch playoff games literally every single day on playback.tv/Lowes Room. So check me out over there. Or as always, just follow me on Twitter. I give like updates on what my thoughts on the playoff games all the time over there. But if not, if you want to hear my thoughts in video format, this is the place to be. So hit the subscribe button and notification bell. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.